So we're moving into the second phase of the negotiation process, which is now moving apart. So we've had our introductions, we've set the scene, we've established our common ground, everybody knows everybody, the atmosphere is good and positive. But now we need to move into the stage where we're kind of looking to not intentionally create differences, but explore the areas where there are going to be challenges and issues that need to be fielded and solutions need to be searched for in later stages. So, Tim, if you'd like to share your screen for us.
I will. And as I'm doing this, one critical point about this stage is the fact that you may be negotiating with a party, and from their perspective, they only have one problem on the table, and that problem could be the price. It's too expensive, for example. And in order to make this negotiation work, you need to think about other problems that you have from your perspective, which demands a lot of creativity as well. So problems that you may have could be, for example, the quality of implementation, the level of their skills when it comes to the project, the amount of discount that they can give you on one particular innovation, and choosing a number of different things. So if you've only got one thing and they've only got one thing, then it's not really a negotiation. It's just an agreement to that one particular thing. It's more about bartering than it is about negotiating. So actually making sure there are topics for you to put on the table is a big part of your preparation process.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point to make there, Tim. You can see in this image in front of us, we have these kind of sort of clouds with ideas and concepts for this phase two in them. So we've already highlighted the importance of allowing the process to move apart, and you see that in a very physical sense in the whole model being that arrow. We're at the point where you've gone along steadily together in the introduction. Now we're kind of jutting away from each other in this stage, which is absolutely fine and intentional. Taking breaks. Tim, why is taking breaks important?
Well, taking breaks is going to be important because um, uh, you need uh, you need the other party to think about what their responses are going to be to proposals. So taking breaks gives you an opportunity to think about what your next step is and what and gives them an opportunity to how to respond to a proposal that you've put on the table. And theoretically, we should be taking how many breaks should we be taking? Really, one every 15 to 20 minutes. There's an argument to take a small break on a regular basis. What about those 2 points, allowing the parties to move apart and putting all of the topics on the table, Mike?
Yeah, yeah. So as we said, we're in this second stage. We're not just allowing, but we're promoting the parties to move apart because there will be issues that you have that you need to put on the table that are not necessarily what the other side wants to hear, but it's absolutely necessary and really crucial for the long-term success of this partnership that these issues are kind of, let's say nipped in the bud before they're allowed to bloom into much bigger problems down the line. So promoting an open discussion, using active listening, but probing and asking questions in areas where you anticipate there could be issues is really, really important, as is getting all of the topics onto the table. So what this process is kind of, a process of laying your cards on the table, but making sure that the other side is laying their cards on the table as well. You really want them to be candid and full with their issues that they have. And the main benefit of this is when you get to the third stage, when you do begin to make proposals and you see it says no proposals slightly further down at this stage, because we'll look at that in a second. But when you get to the proposal stage, if they've put their cards on the table and you kind of put your cards on the table as well, then the proposals can become very, very simple. It's just a matter of matching up their issue and their request with yours using that reciprocal language of negotiation, which we'll look at in phase three, to make a matching proposal that is both beneficial for you and for them. Just quickly on the no proposals, why don't you make proposals at this stage? Well, the reason is simple. How can you make a proposal when you don't yet know what they really need? If you make a proposal here, you're forcing them to do one of two things. Either you're forcing them to say no, which is
Mhm.
not good, it's negative, or they will say yes. And if anything, them saying yes is even worse. Why? Because you've almost certainly given away more than you needed to.
Okay.
The chance of you making a perfect proposal before you understand their position fully are almost zero. So if they say yes, you have to think to yourself, okay, why did they say yes? What did I just give them that was a priority for them or their number one goal or whatever it may be? So we want to avoid making proposals until we can really understand their situation. And that means, as Tim has highlighted, exploring positions and searching for interest. So Tim, tell us about that.
If somebody says it's too expensive, what do they mean? They don't have the budget. They paid too much for it last time. Their boss has given them a cap and they can't go beyond that. They want to prove themselves to be a good negotiator. It's an ego thing. It's what they always say. A number of different interests behind the position. The position is it's too expensive. The position could be it's too complicated. What does that mean? We don't have enough people to do it. We don't have the skills and resources to do it. I'm not brainy enough to understand this. Yeah. I don't like you. I want you to leave. There could be any number of different interests behind this position. So what this says is that people will come out with the position first, and that you need to dig a little bit to understand or to try and understand what their motivation is behind saying that. Yeah. And so that leads us on to, giving a thought to what are the differences between our, position and their position and the interests behind that, Mike.
Yeah. So, as Tim has highlighted, understanding differences. So, there will, of course, be differences between you and your counterpart. There will, of course, be differences that need to be figured out and a common solution need to be found. So, your job, one of the key jobs in this phase two, is to understand those differences. And how do you do that? You don't do that by you talking. That's very important. You do that by getting them to talk. So your job is to ask questions, ask an open question, and then follow it with, probing questions and active listening. Oh, you said this. Tell me a little bit more about that. Or you said this. How does that affect you in relation to that? So your job here is just purely and fully to understand the other side as much as possible. And Tim, we've got a couple of points here, handling objections, and I might
Yeah.
bring that also into managing conflict. So, Tim, maybe you could tell us about those.
So, as is the content of another clip, because it's so important, the objection handling process is linked to what you just said, the active listening process, the summarizing process, and getting people to explain more about what they've just said. And so, a decent and conscious objection handling technique is a method of handling and managing the conflict potential behind this. And also here, I'm going to bring in this strong chairman because, again, we'll devote another clip to this, but the chairman role is the person who can say, hang on a second, ladies, gentlemen, we don't want this to become emotional. We want this to be rational. So the chairman role can handle and manage those emotions, manage that conflict, and it kind of leads us to a different topic, which is how hard it is to do this when there's just one person negotiating, but how important it is for that negotiator to make sure that all of these things are happening within the context of this stage where we're moving apart and allowing the parties to have differences of opinion.
Great, really interesting, Tim. Thank you. And the final point there in the bottom left, it says creating the problem, which does seem counterintuitive, but what it means is you have to force the discussion. You have to force those topics that maybe you've been avoiding until now, whether it's a misalignment of process or misalignment in a financial sense or anything else. You have to have the discussion at this point because the negotiation stage is the last stage before the final agreement is reached and contracts are signed and the next year or 10 years of this relationship are being established. So you have to face the challenges now. If we're going to describe this stage in using just a few words, as you see, it's moving apart. It's really important to visualize that, not in the sense of an uncontrolled fashion, but a controlled fashion. As a strong chairperson, you've established the common ground. It's clear that you are working together. You have a mutual objective, but you need to move apart in order to come back together and end up even closer than you were at the beginning. That's why the visualization of the arrow is not together at the beginning, but it is together at the end.
And, describing this stage in a couple of words, you're going to fight anyway, so do it consciously and do it at the beginning. Yeah, I think that's the real principle behind this. You can't avoid the discussions and the differences of opinion, so make it conscious and put all of those topics on the table right after the opening stage and before you start making proposals. Great.